Hello, and in this video I'm in on and give my thoughts on what's kind of becoming a holy war in the iOS development community, and that's this issue of whether we should create user interfaces in code or use storyboards. And if you don't know, storyboards are the kind of visual thing where you can drag and drop elements and use them to lay out your UI. Now, the TLDR, of my opinion on this, whether we should use storyboards or whether we should write them in code, is that it's really a discussion without merit. Just use whatever is most convenient, and it like most things in life, compromise is the key, and different things are different situations. But there's a couple of specific things I want to talk about and kind of get more nuanced about the debate. So, I've heard particularly some more experienced developers, because I'm not currently a very experienced developer, saying that writing your UI in code is really the way to go, and we shouldn't be using this newfangled storyboard stuff because it's slow, it's hard to maintain and whatever. And I think, to be honest, a lot of that is just kind of old developer pride. Maybe they've developed for older platforms that don't have graphical ways to lay out the UI, and they do everything in code, and they're just kind of not used to that. I also think there's some sort of kudos to saying, well, I write all my user interfaces in code and I leave it to beginners to use that fancy dancy WYSIWYG drag and drop stuff. I actually think that there's an interesting perspective on that from the hacking with Swift guy, and that's basically what he said, that there's some people out like there's some specialty. You're somehow a better programmer if you don't use storyboards, and if you decide to architect all your user interfaces in code. But what you've got to remember is that Apple created these tools for us, and they're actively investing in these tools. So to say that they don't want to use them, or that are somehow using the UI or writing code is somehow the way you're intended to do something, just isn't the case, because they've invested in those tools. Now, there might be the case that for some features there's more storyboard stuff, and for some features there's less, but that's more a tenet of the fact that there's different teams working on all these different APIs, and they just have different perspectives, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Now, the most kind of extreme case of this is that I heard Brian Vlong of the Let's Build the App YouTube channel, one of his, because he's a very big tenet of doing everything in code, and one of his subscribers recently came out thanking him for doing everything in code, because he apparently got a job on the basis that he wrote everything in code. Well, far be it from me to harm my future employment prospects as an iOS developer, but I am not sure what that really says about the company that this guy applied to. If they're willing to make a determination based on just whether he builds the user interface in code or by the storyboard, when the end user gets exactly the same results and there's no kind of runtime performance differences, then I'm not sure what I think about the priorities of that company now. I'm actually just going to interrupt my past self here, because this wasn't in the original video, it's an additional point, but I just wanted to say, related to what I've just said, that I actually think it's a basic tenet of human intelligence to be adaptable and to use the appropriate thing in the appropriate context, and it's what programs about. That's why we don't all just take things off the shelf and just use a framework as is. You customize it, you know how to apply things intelligently, you know how to apply classes, v structs intelligently. So part of the this industry is being adaptable and being able to decide for yourself what works in what situation. So anyway, I'll let my past self continue with the rest of the video. Let's talk about some of the specifics of the features. It can be quicker to write user interfaces in code, because rather than having to load up the storyboard and drag a load of stuff around, we can just write several lines of code, but it also pollutes our code base to do that. And that's one of the things that I really think storyboards are good for. It kind of promotes separation of concerns, so that we don't have all these UI objects initialized in our other controller objects. All of our UI is handled in the storyboard, and that's separated from all our other controller logic. God knows in standard iOS apps, massive view controllers are enough of a problem that people want to come up with MVVM and stuff like that. The last thing we need to be doing is polluting them with UI code. Now, another thing to mention is that storyboards are code. They're XML files, and in some cases I'll actually edit the XML file to edit something in the storyboard that I want to manipulate. And also the fact that XML means that they can be committed to version control, so you can use them on teams, and some teams do to great effect. They're not as easy to maybe commit and see diff of as other other ways of initializing user interfaces, but it can be done, and it does work. And I think for all the other benefits you get of using storyboards, a small decline of efficiency there is the right way to go. Now, one thing that I will say about initializing from code is that because you name all the objects, because you say let navbar equal UI navigation controller or navigation bar, you know easier what to search for when you're searching through your project to find a certain user interface element. It can be the same for constraints too. You can label constraints more easily and sort of edit them, but I think the convenience of being able to see where the frames are can sometimes be helpful. Now, we can also search for storyboards, and you can label things inside of Xcode, so we can make things a little bit easier to see and not quite as much of a nested mess. And related to that, a lot of people complain that when you have 5, 6, 7 view controllers, things can get slow and the storyboard can just kind of become overrun. The zooming on storyboards isn't very efficient, I don't think, but you can separate, or as Apple calls it, refactor storyboards, and you can there was a video about this by Sean Allen actually, but he didn't show how to use the automated system, and the automated system actually works very, very well. You can just select any view controllers in your scene and say hit refactor to storyboard, and it'll automatically put those into a separate storyboard with an automatic link to the other storyboard, and everything wired up for you and will already work correctly, but just in a different storyboard. So if you ever wondered what the UI storyboard reference class was for, that's what it's for, referencing one storyboard from another, from something initialized from another storyboard, and that's kind of another indication that Apple do want you to use this technology. They're not expecting you to just have one unwieldy storyboard. So if you're saying, I can't maintain the storyboard because it's too big, it's because people aren't using the technology in the way it's intended to be used, and you've got to just harken back to the fact that having storyboards or bringing so many new people into the platforms, opposed to something like C++, WX widgets, where it's a great framework, but you have to do everything in code unless you've got some third-party library. And clearly, other companies have seen the value of this and decided to follow suit with Apple, because things like the Windows Presentation Foundation, or all the UI files for that are in XML, and that's the same kind of system. So the things I guess to take away from this video, it's not a badge of honor to say you write everything in code. The two things aren't also completely separate. The storyboard generates code. Also, you can kind of refactor and reorganize your storyboards, but searching and committing is a little more difficult. And also at the end of the day, you're still initializing your components in the same way. They're just being caused by a different initializer init with coder instead of init with frame in terms of a UI object. Now, one distinction I didn't want to make is, I think there's one case where it's better for, one case that I've come across where it was better for me to put some code in my controller rather than put it in the storyboard. And that was when I wanted to create a toolbar that I wanted to be in an abstract superclass, that I was then going to use across multiple controllers. And because I wanted to use it across multiple controllers and kind of be able to edit it at the superclass level, that wasn't a good case for using the storyboard, because the kind of works under one view controller scene at a time, and if you have it linked across multiple scenes through IB outlets, that essentially just copies another instance of it, and so you end up with the same situation. Anyway, guys, that was just my thoughts on storyboards in general. So the salient points are, storyboards don't have to be an unwieldy mess, because you've got that refactored sort of storyboards. You can search storyboards and label storyboards, and also it's not a badge of honor to say you write everything in code, but it can be quicker, and there are some cases where like abstract superclassing, where storyboards just aren't viable. Apple know that, and that's why they offer both versions. Anyway, guys, thank you for watching this video. I hope you found it useful. If you have liked it, please subscribe, it really helps out. Like, or whatever YouTube's calling it now. And yeah, I'll see you in the next video. Thanks, guys.